and to embrace the principles of openness, honesty, respect for each other's opinions, and the common priorities of putting citizens at the centre. This committee really is the vehicle that considers the Charter and monitors any action plan to ensure effective monitoring takes place and to monitor the progress overall. With regards to accessing information for this committee, a meeting reminder is emailed to all Town and Community Council representatives 3 weeks before the meeting. Please let myself know or Democratic Services generally as soon as possible if you're no longer the representative for your town or community council, or you need to provide your apologies or nominate your substitute to attend the meeting on your behalf. Agenda papers are published 1 week, that's 7 days, including the weekend, in advance of the meeting. So you will note that for this Thursday evening meeting, the papers were published last Thursday. The remote meeting invitation, as you're aware from joining this evening, is through Microsoft Teams, and this is emailed out the day after the agenda is published, so the Friday before the Thursday meeting. There are some standing agenda items that are on every agenda for the committee, and our meetings take place 4 times a year, roughly on a quarterly basis. So the standing items are police matters, fire service matters and statistics, and any requests for consideration that have come through from town and community councils. And I'll offer you further advice on that shortly. Other agenda items that we may have for this committee are any updates that have been received as a result of meetings between the Vale of Glamorgan Monitoring Officer and clerks of the town and community councils. As I mentioned earlier, any further works or updates with regards to the Town and Community Council and Vale of Glamorgan Charter, any reports that have been referred to you directly from Vale of Glamorgan officers, and any updates from representatives on various bodies that may want to update you in terms of policy and legislation changes. So, for example, a report may be received on the Strong Communities Grant Fund. So requests for consideration, these can be raised by town and community councils via their clerk. The pro forma is available on request from the email address on screen, the generic democratic email address, or from myself directly, if that's easier. A matter to be considered through a request must be a matter that impacts the Vale of Glamorgan area as a whole, and not just the one individual town or community council area. Requests must be made by members of the town or community council via their clerk and not directly from the members of the public. If a member of the public wishes a matter to be considered, it must be processed via the community council clerk. This, in the majority, in the most part, helps us to cut down on duplication of requests, because we often find that matters that members of the public wish to raise with us have already been raised formally by the respective town or community council. Requests will be shared with the relevant director and service area for assessment when they're received by myself, and a response then provided at the next available or appropriate community liaison committee meeting. Depending on the subject that's been requested, it may take a bit of time for officers to formulate an accurate response for the committee. That's all I wish to say at the moment, Chair, with regards to a very brief overview of the committee. And obviously I am happy to take any questions now, but I am aware that you do have a very full agenda this evening. So I am happy to take any questions via the chat, as not to delay progress this evening if members would wish to do that, or I can take them for you now. Thank you.
Okay, are members happy to contact Amy or put them in the chat and then we'll move on? Okay, I think that'd be a good idea, Amy. Agenda item 5 is police matters. Can I ask Inspector Stuart McDean, please? Good evening, and would you like to present your police update, please?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for the invite to this evening. I've got some stats just over the last month or so, just to let you know where we are. I know that stats by themselves can be not great unless they're given a bit of context. So hopefully I've broken it down a little bit. In terms of overall calls that we've had for the Vale, they've gone down from the previous month. We've had a total of, for the Barry area, of ASB calls of 83, which may sound quite significant, but a lot of them, I've broken them down, had a good look at them. A lot of them are neighbour annoyance calls that is quite historic. In terms of youth annoyance, we had quite a quiet month last month in the Barry area in terms of calls coming into police, but it's something we'll be looking obviously to have extra resources on over the summer months once the schools close, which I'll come on to shortly. In terms of other types of crime for the Barry area in particular, dwelling burglaries, we had 14 dwelling burglaries, and thefts from motor vehicles, we had 13. There is an operation and a process now with the 2 MPT sergeants of Barry, which is going to have some extra funding to see if we can mitigate some of that demand around the theft from motor vehicles. And I'll pass any updates to that as soon as I get them, which I'm sure we will have. In terms of the Vale, again, ASB, we had 31 calls in the Vale over the last 4 weeks. Again, that's down on the previous month. And having a look in the deep dive detail of them, a lot of them are neighbourhood annoyance, but also we've had some youth annoyance in Wenvo, and also a number of youth annoyance calls in the St Athan and Lantwich major areas, which Chris Thomas, the sergeant there, is having a look at to see if there's any pattern developing on that, so we can make sure we can mitigate that as well. And in the Penarth area as well, another quiet month in terms of numbers, particularly around ASB. We only had 18 calls in Penarth for ASB in total for the last 4 weeks. And again, 10 of those were for youth annoyance, mostly in the Plymouth St Augustine area, and only 7 in Dinas Powys, which again is down from the previous month. In terms of dwelling burglaries, we had 5 dwelling burglaries in Penarth, but we have got a suspect that is currently in prison at the moment, who will be brought out of prison to be questioned over those burglaries, so we should get those detected. In terms of, sorry, before I go on to some of the plans we got for the summer, did anyone have any questions over the statistics? I know they can be quite boring at times. I don't know how much detail you'd like me to provide.
No, has anybody got a question so far? I think we're okay at the moment, Stuart. If anybody has, we can ask them at the end anyway. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah, over the summer period, starting next Friday when schools break out, we're going to have Operation Elstree, which is a similar operation to we had last year. This is extra resources being brought into the whole coastal area from Cardiff Bay right over to Ogmore to help to mitigate the ASB that we see coming in terms of the summer months and visitors to the coastal areas. That'll be extra resources, police resources, horses, dogs, you name it. We've got it over the summer months on the Friday, Saturdays and Sundays for those periods, working from the afternoon into the evening, as I said, to mitigate some of the ASB. We'll also be enforcing, along with the local authority, public safety protection orders in terms of alcohol. We're going for a bit of a zero tolerance approach this summer, because I know that we've had a lot of incidents last summer in terms of youth annoyance that came from alcohol. And this is also going to be a social media message pushed up to Mid Glamorgan and to up to the valleys areas. We saw a lot of youths coming down with alcohol to the coastal areas from those different areas. So that message has been pushed out across social media. So hopefully that'll have an impact. And like I said, extra resources on throughout the whole summer through Operation Elstree. We also have an emergency services day coming up on the 19th of August up on Penarth Cliff Tops from 10 till 4 p.m. With a number of our blue light partners and other agencies there, and it will also be an opportunity if anyone is free, want to come along and meet the Penarth neighbourhood team. That's on the 19th of August, and obviously we will be continuing across the Vale and Barry with our Cuppa with a Copper, our drop-in surgeries for any of our PCSOs and neighbourhood beat managers, for anyone who has any questions, wants to raise any issues, and they'll also be going out on social media for everyone's attention and to attend if they wish. So free for any other questions.
Okay, I see Councillor Wilson, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Stuart, for that resume. I've just got a couple of questions. What I've heard quite recently in Penarth, and then to a certain extent in Cosmoston, I know it does occur in Roos as well, and Roos Point, is young kids, I mean, I'm talking about year 8, year 9, year 7, jumping in to the water from Penarth Pier, jumping into Cosmoston, jumping in to Roos, on the lagoon in Roos Point. Clearly, this is a serious issue, because even if they think they're clever by doing this or showing off, all they need to get is a tide wrong, or for them to hurt themselves. And we're talking about a very serious incident, aren't we? So I'd like to, South Wales Police, I know, we will try and publicise it as councillors for people not to do this. And I know with the sunny weather and the heat we've been having is very attractive. But I just think we need to emphasise, very importantly, that this is unacceptable. This is very, very dangerous. you know, and obviously to say to the communities, you know, if you know kids that are doing this, please stop them doing it, you know, before it's too late.
Yeah, particularly after the tragic incident that we had over in Fairwater a number of weeks ago, where a young pupil lost their lives. It's something that the neighbourhood team met with the RNLI and Coast Guard last week to talk about some water safety education events that we're going to have across the Vale over the summer as part of Operation Elstree. We've also asked across the whole of Cardiff, really, and the Vale, for our schools liaison officers in the week before they break up to school to do water safety inputs across all the classes, and that's been pushed out as well. And I believe all the local leisure centres, my daughter herself had a swimming lesson last week, and they went through water safety advice with her, which was pushed from the local authorities. So we've got a number of measures in place. Up Elstree, particularly for the Penarth officers, will be doing patrols around that and on all the coastal areas, because we don't want to see any more tragic incidents that we had in Whitchurch. We are well aware of it, and we are aware of the public feeling around it as well. So those messages will be getting pushed out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Franks, would you like to ask your question, please?
Well, I think I should say I'm not a member of this committee, but hopefully you'll let me ask a question. Dinas Post Library is delighted to host Cuppa with a Copper. We know the local PCSOs quite well now. The problem is we're never confident that they're able to attend. So if we tell residents, come along and speak to the officers, sometimes we look a little bit foolish when they're not there. Now, I wonder if you have an answer to this dilemma. Thank you.
No, they certainly should be there. We've had an uplift in the last couple of months of PCSOs, so we've got extra PCSOs for the Penarth MPT team. But I'll certainly raise that with Sam Johnson, who's the sergeant for the team, and make sure they do attend, because, as you said, it's pointless advertising Cup with a Copper if you're not going to have someone there to answer the issues. And we really are keen to do that face-to-face after 2 years of Zoom meetings and Teams meetings such as this. It's nice to get out and do that face-to-face interaction. So if there's any issues like that happen again, please feed them back to me and I'll make sure that people attend. But I'll also feed that back to Sam Johnson as well to say if it is advertised, someone needs to be there, so that won't happen again in future.
Okay, thank you for that. But I don't have your contact details, so perhaps that could be provided. And I'd also extend an invitation to you to come and have a delicious cup of tea or coffee in Dinas Post Library.
Yeah, certainly will. If I don't know if Amy's available, I'm more than happy for anyone to have my email address or my contact or phone number to ring me. That's not a problem at all.
Okay, lovely. Amy will email us out. Is that okay, Amy?
Absolutely, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Aviat, please, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Stuart, it's been really difficult for some of the new councillors to get hold of their PCSOs, and I've also got the link and I shared it, you know, for South Wales Police. I'm very fortunate, myself and Margaret Wilkinson, we're very fortunate in Gibbons and Colquitt, because we know our PCSOs, even though we haven't met face to face again lately. But can you put a link on so the new councillors can find out who exactly their PCSOs are? An easier one, because I was on the phone for like to 101 for over an hour. It was really frustrating.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. What I'll do is we've got a full list of the new PCSOs with their photos, contact, email addresses, and phone numbers. What I'll do is I send that through to Amy. Again, I'm happy for her to share that with all of you, so everyone knows who the PCSOs are for each particular ward. That's not a problem at all.
And one more question is, I'm also on Barry Town Council, and when we have our full council meetings, somebody from, you know, one of your representatives is supposed to be there. Can you tell me what's happening there, please? Because we haven't seen anyone for ages.
Right, yeah, it's my counterpart covering Barry's, Inspector Mark Henderson. If you want to send me the link for the next meeting, I'll make sure that he's fully aware of it and make sure he attends.
Thank you.
Could I also just jump in there, Stuart, with 101? I think there's an email, and I think the email saves us all hanging on the line for a very long time, and I believe it's watched and responded to as the phone calls. So maybe you could put the email address in for the 101 number as well. That would be helpful. Thank you. And Councillor Perks, would you like to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think you mentioned that burglaries in Barry and car theft, so you might have some extra money for that to sort of mitigate it. I wondered if there's particular areas in Barry that you might be concentrating on, if you're able to tell us those.
Well, yeah, it's the one of the wards is Castleland, is the
Okay.
one we had the most burglaries on, and Buttrells.
Okay.
Those are the two areas where we've had the dwelling burglaries reported, which we'll be concentrating on. I know that our CID team do have a suspect in mind for it. I think we just need that extra bit of reassurance patrols, but also some plainclothes patrols as well, which is something we don't obviously, because they're covert, we don't obviously advertise them on Facebook and Twitter until we get the positive results. But there will be extra officers out and about, although fingers crossed, if they're doing their job properly, you should notice them until we have a suspect. But they'll be the main areas for the stats that we have.
Lovely, thank you. I'm in Court Ward, Barry, and my fellow councillor and myself, we've actually been contacted by our PCSO to sort of set up a meeting. So we're hopeful for next Friday. So it'd be good to actually meet them. I was on made a 101 call over a week ago about some antisocial behaviour by youths. I was on there for 40 minutes, and in the end, I emailed the next day. But I was advised I should have phoned 999, so I'll know what I need to do next time. But yeah, they were breaking into one of the buildings on Holton Road, one of the disused buildings. So I'll take that advice on board. But I didn't know whether it was an urgent call or not, so I tried the 101. But I know for next time now.
What I'd say is, if it's a crime in progress, 999 every time, and even if we turned up and it's not what we thought it was, I'd rather we go. And particularly if we get my plan is, if we get these PCSO details out during the day and the evening, give them a ring on their work phone. Yeah. If it's ASP, don't worry about the 101 line. You know, I'm hoping for better communication. So we've got that with our PCSOs. You can just give the one for your ward a ring, get that information straight out.
Yeah, and definitely I take on board the police officer advised me as well what he said. So yeah, I take that on board. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mr. Ian Perry, please.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just a few things. You mentioned 101, and we've had some antisocial behaviour in St Nicholas. Now, I think you mentioned Wenville Ward, but St Nicholas is now part of St Nicholas with Lancarvans. I think your stats go back to the old ward, so I'm not sure if Wenville actually had any of this sort of behaviour. And I spent 1 hour 33 minutes trying to get hold of 101 because my PCSO was off duty. So yeah, I'm aware of the long waiting list and the number of residents who came to me and said they couldn't get through and given up. So hopefully that can be rectified. What I want to ask you in particular is about the new 20-mile-an-hour speed limits that have come into effect as of next year from the legislation passed yesterday. And something that concerns me is the actual when the police respond to incidents. And I was out in my village, St Nicholas, recently, and I did hear a siren briefly before 2 police vehicles sped past me at 80 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. They were flying and they had to hit the brakes to go around a small bend. That's how fast they were going. Now, part of the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit is to encourage more people to be on the road, on the street, on bicycles, and that includes people with young children, which I've taken young children on the A48 with great care in the past. Now, if someone's coming through at 80 miles an hour, even with a siren, you cannot get off the road in time. So I'm wondering if we can have a review of how the police respond to emergencies, and we all know we all want to see the police turn up quickly, but if it means travelling through urban areas at high speeds, a siren and a blue light doesn't allow a person with young children necessary to get out of the way, and there could be a tragic accident.
Oh, 100% agree. Legislation says that police officers responding to a 99 call can go 15 miles per hour over the registered speed limit. So obviously that would be, when that changes to 20, that would be going for what a 20-mile-an-hour zone. 35 is the maximum they'd be able to do with their blue lights on anyway. So if you managed to get the registration number, then obviously that officer would need to be spoken to, because that was way above. It's actually illegal what they were doing, regardless, as you said, what the call they might be going to. And if we're going to set an example to other people, we should be obviously abiding by it ourselves. So there will be a bit of re-education going out when that changes next year. But like I said, it's 15 miles per hour over the stated speed limit is the maximum we're allowed to do. And that's there for a reason. So we can respond to incidents like that. But I'll definitely take that on board and pass it out to the local teams.
Yeah, thank you. Because we're trying to set up a community speed watch, and we don't want to be right into the police force.
Oh, exactly.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Stuart. So that you covered agenda item 5. Agenda item 6 is still yours, Stuart. Is that okay? It's
Yes,
a request for consideration from Langan Community Council. So I'll let you answer that one, please.
Yeah, I think the concern that came in was regarding the statistics that were being passed out for that particular council member. I think the reason being that the stats were passed out, they didn't really have any background to them. As I mentioned before, if I say there's 20 antisocial behaviour incidents happen, that doesn't mean anything. What does that mean? Unless we provide the details to yourselves that have some bit of context to them, how can you go back to constituents to say you know what's going on? So I think the matter that was raised is that the stats that were being sent out were quite meaningless. So it's definitely something that all of us across neighbourhood policing taken on board. It's obviously something we have to have a balance of, because obviously there's data protection issues there that we can't give addresses and names of victims and things like that. But certainly I'm more than happy to share as much information as I can, and we all will be now that on the new neighbourhood sergeants across Cardiff and the Vale, to give you that educated idea of what's actually happening. Because unless we do that, how can you understand the issues that are going on, what policing are doing? So that won't happen in future. There will be much more detailed statistics available for yourselves. And of course, particularly for yourselves in this meeting, myself or Mark Henderson, if you ever want to give us a call and talk over a particular issue that's come through or go through the stats in a bit more detail, I'm more than happy for either of us to make that appointment with you offline to go through the stats and talk through exactly what the story is behind all the numbers.
Lovely. That's very helpful. I don't know if the representative from Langan is here and has any questions. I'm very sorry. Would that be David Reid? No?
Yes, that's right, yes.
Mr. Reid, would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
I would. I mean, the background behind this request is that for 18 months or 2 years, all we've had is essentially a brief written or verbal report sent in or phoned in to our clerk. We haven't had any face-to-face contact with our PCSO in that time. We've had various explanations. I won't call them excuses because that would be unfair, but the explanations have been, I'm not allowed to participate in Zoom meetings. I'm not on shift at the time your meetings take place. And the latest one is I don't have a car. I mean, they have been, I suppose, difficult to understand at times. But what we're concerned about is not so much the paucity of information in the statistics, which are obviously a month late, we get them at least a month late, but the fact that we like to think that the members of our community, and I'm a small village, so I think I can speak for many of the smaller rural parts of the Vale, like to think that we take care, or we try to take care, of the other members in our community. We've never been approached to help in any incident that's taken place of either antisocial behaviour or noise or disputes between neighbours. Is there a mediator available from the council? Is there somebody local who could take care? Now, we know all the single living alone elderly people in the area. I like to think we're also aware of the majority of those who may be suffering from regular or temporary mental disturbance. I mean, I don't mean severe, but if they're under stress, we gossip enough to know what's causing the stress, etc. And I think we're a resource that should be used more by the PCSOs, but it's about timely information. They don't seem to have a brief to involve members of the community. I hesitate to say leaders of the community because I think that's a little bit of a tribal or feudal concept, but there are undoubtedly organisations like, for example, the local church. Now, you know, the local church considers itself, in a way, a guardian or an aider, a help to the well-being of the community. So I think it's about timeliness of statistics. The fact that the opportunity might present itself to care for a member of our community before a criminal act takes place or a crime is designated as a result of an incident. My understanding of the stats is there's a big difference between an incident and a crime. And I take your point about data protection, but I wonder who is being served by the confidentiality that's being exercised. So that's really the background of this item.
Like I said, I'd be more than help. I'm sure most PCSOs that would like any help they can to resolve. As you know, some of these neighbourhood issues can go on for a number of years and cause a lot of pain and stress to people. But from the data protection thing, we have to be sure that the people that we're dealing with are happy for their information to be shared, because some people could be embarrassed by it. Some people might not want the wider community to know what's going on behind closed doors. So we can't just share that information without their permission. Otherwise, we'll be getting in trouble as an organisation. Yeah. So I'm more than happy to put that message out there to PCSOs when they go to these town courts to say, look, do you mind your information being shared with a local councillor who might be able to mediate? And if they say yes, then of course, then obviously that opens a door to allow us to bring you in for your assistance. And in terms of the stats being a month out of date, I'm hoping, as I said, with this new, we've got a new neighbourhood policing plan coming in South Wales Police, that you'll have much more regular contact with your local MBMs and PCSOs. So the meeting at the end of the month will just to be reinforce what you already know, because you'll have had those conversations possibly on a weekly basis. I know there's something I'm bringing into Cardiff Bay and Penarth. I'm sure we're going to bring out across the Vale as well, to make sure we have regular conversations, so you know what's going on, rather than have those meetings, 3 months apart.
Yes, I recognise it's a matter of judgment and has to be exercised very carefully. Thank you, Stuart.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Could I ask Councillor John to ask his question, please?
Is that me, John Andrew?
Yes, sorry, Councillor Andrew, is it?
Yeah, John Andrew from Cowbridge. Yes, first of all, well, I'm glad that this has been raised, this matter. It's something I've raised a number of times locally. We do receive monthly crime reports, which are just the raw data, really. And we, COVID accepted, we have attendance by a police constable or a PCSO. So I'm happy with that arrangement. But what I would much prefer to see, rather than just the monthly data, which I don't find very helpful, is not more detail, but would like to see trends, priorities, and key issues, really, and have those summarised, preferably in a written report for each meeting, and then that written report could be amplified upon by the guys who attend. But that's really what I would like to see, rather than the raw data, are what are the trends, what are the key issues, and what are the priorities in the local area. Thank you.
Yeah, that's certainly something we can look at. Obviously, the trends are based on the stats, but obviously, like I said, a list of numbers doesn't really help anyone, does it? I think we're all sick of things like that. But I could certainly make sure that the document that goes out is a bit more reader-friendly, and obviously identify issues in particular areas that we're concentrating on. So I could definitely look at that. That's not a problem at all.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Councillor Campbell, please.
Hiya. I'm in quite a unique situation because I'm in Roos Ward. We don't have a town or community council. So how does all this information get, put across to the public?
In terms of the crime statistics?
Yeah, because who do they go to up here?
Crime statistics, I think you can go on the website, South Wales Police website, and put in your postcode to see crime statistics for your area. But in terms of the stats that I provide yourself, it's not something we put out to the public as a matter of course. It'd come to yourselves as councillors, so we can discuss any issues and trends, as the previous councillor said. But the public can go on to the crime stats, there's a crime stats website. I think there's a link on South Wales Police website where you can put in a postcode to see what crime trends are happening in your area. But as I mentioned, I think stats don't tell the whole story. If you're told there's 30 ASB incidents in the last month, what is that telling you? Unless you know the context behind them. So I'm more than happy for our local MBM who covers your area, if you'd have a conversation with them to pass any particular stats out to the community, if that's what you'd like. So
I'll get that information, will I?
Yeah, if you look, I'll get the once you get my contact details, if you want to drop me an email about anything specific you want to discuss, or what particular stats you'd like, I can get the MBM for an area to put something together for you.
Yeah, it's just because I'm assuming that obviously I don't know about town and community councils, that you just send them out like monthly to whoever on the community councils, so that doesn't happen up here. No, because obviously we don't have one.
I think what will be better in future is a bit more of specific time report, having like a big stats page for everyone. If you know a particular councillor covering a particular area, if they like a couple of paragraphs about what's going on in their area without using all the stats and numbers, I think that'll make a lot more sense for everyone for their particular PCSO MBM to produce a monthly report for each councillor for each ward. I think that's what's sensible, and it's not a huge issue for us to do that if that's what everyone would prefer.
I don't know. I think we might have to think about that one really, because Roos is different because you haven't got a community council. So maybe, Samantha, it might be better if we liaise with Democratic Services and find a way that would be helpful to feed back to you. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that'd be great, Sally. I just don't want it. I just don't want to feel like missing out on information because we don't have the town and community council. I know it's very unique in the Vale, you know, being pretty much the only place that doesn't have one. But we still should kind of have the same going in some way or another.
We'll come back to you and see what we can do there for you, okay? And on a positive note, we in Nantwich Major have a very good relationship with our sergeant there, and it works well. Councillor Perry, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Hi again, you see me? Yeah, you mentioned the website, and the website, I've mentioned this over the last few years, isn't up to date. I've just checked here now, and you know, I'm no longer part of the Wenver Ward, but I'm still included in the Wenver Ward, which is incorrect. And the PCSOs have changed. The contact details are missing. So yeah, that website continues to be a source of frustration.
Yeah, for me as well.
Yeah. So yeah, you're referring us to that, and we can't get the information. And going back to the comments from the person from Langan, in St Nicholas, and I believe also in Cambridge, we've got new PCSOs, and the communication has greatly improved in the last few months, and we're really happy with Steve. And long may that continue. There's a lot of information going backwards and forwards. So it's a case of us being available, and maybe a bit of training, that's not really the right word, but you know, coercion maybe of police officers to contact us, because some are doing it in some areas and others are not doing it in other areas. So if perhaps you could get everyone to be as communicative as Steve is for us, that would be really, really useful.
Yeah, 100%. That's what we're aiming towards. In terms of the website, I've sent the new details to our corporate services, but unfortunately they're not as switched on as maybe they should be, and it's taken a lot of time, which is why what I'll do is I'll send out an email to all of you with the new PCSOs, with their emails and phone numbers, so you can keep them handy rather than trying to navigate the SWP website, which is not the best. But yeah, I certainly take that on board.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your question, Councillor Perry. And Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's a few issues at the moment. We in Penarth, I'm also a town councillor as well. Yeah. In Penarth, we do have data, but the data is very inconsistent from one meeting to another meeting. That's one issue, I would say, in terms of how it's presented, and that's one issue. Second issue, as Councillor Campbell rightly says, not every area of the Vale, although most areas do have a town and community council, but Wood certainly doesn't. But I would think it'd be useful if we could do something which is consistent across the Vale, so that everyone can see recorded crime in the way it's described consistently. I just think it'd be easy for everyone. I know there are administrative burdens, and the police to me about detecting crime and, you know, and reducing the instance of crime, and that's your number one job, you know, and I think that's we all understand and recognise that. But I also think that we as elected members want to assist you and help you as well. And obviously we want to focus on areas where there are issues. And that's why it's vital to have this relationship with yourselves. And I think moving forward, if we can develop that consistency, I think that'd be really, really useful. But you know, Councillor Perry is right. You know, there are issues with the website. There's been issues for a number of years. This is not recent. I'm afraid it's not. You know, in getting hold of PCSOs, it's not always easy. Although my new PCSOs in Stanmore, they're absolutely brilliant. You know, they're really, really helpful, and they're really, really positive and enthusiastic, which is what I want. But it'd be great perhaps to have all that information readily available. And I appreciate you say you're going to give us something to Amy on paper. And I think moving forward, if we can even have a local site, if you don't have to go through the hierarchy, so available to us, even linked with our own website on the Vale Council, I think that could be a way forward.
Yeah, like I said, that corporate services up at headquarters don't move at the right speed that we'd all like them to. I don't know whether, like you said, your local web page, whether we could have an amendment or an add-on to that with all the details of the PCSOs. And in terms of the stats and having a corporate approach to it across, it's just really, it's easy for us to get that analytical data. It's just knowing what you want to hear about, what are the crime patterns that you want, because there's so many different types of crime. Thousands of incidents happen every month. If you tell us what you want as councillors yourself and how you want it presented, do you want, a pie chart? Do you want like a graph? Do you want it in a written form? Do you want it in stat? You tell us what you want, and it's easy enough for us to prepare. So if we had a corporate approach and sort of what sort of crime figures and what sort of trends and what particular offences you'd like information on, then it's not a problem at all.
Oh, right, lovely, thank you. That's food for thought, isn't it? And we'll have to think about that. Excellent. And the last question coming from Councillor Aviett.
Thank you, Chair. Stuart, on a local level, people just, some of the things as councillors we deal with are police matters. It could be a neighbour feud, it could be somebody kicking off in the middle of the night or anything like that. And they, it's like some of it's low level. I know the PCSOs don't work after 10, I don't think, but they want somewhere to go, and it's something that sometimes it's incidents that councillors can't really deal with. It's a police matter.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've got no special privilege. We can't get through to you, and they can't get through to you, to you on that kind of thing. I'm just wondering if you can come up with some ideas that the public, when it's that kind of low level of crime, but it's still concerning, that councillors can't deal with, that maybe you could. Thank you.
Yeah, well, PCSOs, they should be working until midnight, which I know that the vast majority are calls sort of like SB in the early to late evening sort of times. There should be, and we've got 2 teams on, as you know, in Barry, covering that period, so there should be somebody on. So I'm hoping that when we get all the MBM's mobile numbers to you, if 101's causing a problem, you can't get through on the Facebook page, email, or the phone, that you should have a number you can ring. Because the earlier the calls are, the youth annoyance can lead to the criminal damage, can lead to the car getting smashed. But if we're there earlier, it stays low level, which is what everyone wants. So certainly I'll take that back in terms of the communication side of things. Like I said, it's the 21st century now. We should be able to get a hold of somebody quite quickly. All PCSOs have got a mobile phone. They've got an email address. They work till midnight across Vale. So there should be someone, but it's certainly something I'll take back to make sure you've got all those contact numbers and the public have them as well.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. And thank you for your presence here tonight and answering all our questions. And I think it's been very helpful. So thank you very much.
No problem. Like I said, if Amy sends my details out, anyone wants to get hold of me, please drop me a line.
Okay. Sorry,
Chair,
Julie.
It was Amy, Chair. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to just summarise before we move on to Mr. Hadfield for the fire service, just to quickly get the committee's permission in terms of my introductory presentation, just to confirm that the committee are happy to note that, and also for the police matters this evening, to note and thank Inspector McDean for his presentation. And then for the request for consideration to ask that obviously all of the suggestions raised by the committee are obviously taken forward by the inspector this evening, and that we do make sure that the contact information as referred to this evening is forwarded to all members of the Vale of Glamorgan and Town and Community Councils, not just the members of the committee this evening. Can I just have a mover and seconder for those recommendations, please?
I'm happy to move, Amy.
I'm happy to second, Councillor Aviett.
Lovely, thank you. That's done, Amy. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 7, fire and rescue.
Just to confirm for Inspector, he's free to go, just to let him know.
Oh, right, sorry, Stuart. Yes, you're free to go. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Fire and Rescue Service Matters, Mr. Christian Hadfield. Nice to see you tonight. No technical issues, Christian.
No, we've moved on to 365, so I've had no technical glitches so far. So thank you, Chair, and thanks, committee, and thanks for welcoming me back. I have got a presentation for you, but I think I better start by introducing myself to new members. So my name is Christian Hadfield. I'm a group manager in South Wales Fire and Rescue Service. My main role is I'm responsible for the fire stations and emergency services stations within Vale of Glamorgan and Bridgend. That's 11 in total. I'm also responsible for the governance structure for Fire Control Room, which is based down in Bridgend headquarters, and I'm the strategic lead for water rescue and flooding for South Wales. I'm also a very proud resident of the Vale of Glamorgan. When I was here last, I did present on statistics for the Vale of Glamorgan, and one of the statistics that was we had a round discussion on was attack on crews. So I was tasked with bringing back to this committee really what's going on with attack on crews from a national perspective and locally. So I have got a very, very short presentation to show you. It is short, and I will stay on script. If there are any questions at the end, by all means, please ask, or if you want to take it offline, I'm happy for my details to be shared. So I'm going to go to the power of technology, he says. Please tell me if you can see that.
Not yet.
No. Oh, there we go. Bear with me. It's not a good start.
Just as a backup plan, Christian, oh, it has come up on screen now for you. That's lovely. But I was just going to say, if you had any issues, you could email it to me and I could try sharing for you.
Have trust in me.
Yeah,
there we go.
So yeah,
very nice.
I'm going to start with first of all what you're going to get from this really. So I'm going to give you a view of the top. Really, with what we are doing as emergency services to combat this issue that we're facing. So it's the backdrop you see in there. If you do know that station, it's Lantwick Major. I'm particularly proud of this station. It's the first quad station of its kind in the country. And the reason why I've got this as my backdrop is because we as emergency services work very, very closely with each other. But we also stand in union in terms of trying to reduce and eliminate attack on our emergency services crews that, you know, they're doing their best as a job to be able to protect the public, and yet when we do carry out our role, we are getting these attacks. So hopefully you can see this slide is popped up now. So this is a little bit of a snapshot really of a campaign that was carried out in December last year. This was led by Chief Constable Jeremy Vaughan in conjunction or collaboration with the CEO of WAST, which is Jason Killins, and our Chief Fire Officer, Hugh Jakeway. So this is really just to pick up the thread of where we were towards the end of last year and the increase of assaults we were having on emergency services. So you can see that yourself. We're roughly around about 8 assaults a day really on emergency services in Wales. And you can see the stats there, which are quite startling really. And when you talk about attack on crews, it's anything from verbal abuse to physical abuse to premeditated attacks, which is something we probably are most vulnerable to as a fire service, and I'll touch on that in a second. But our campaign was with us, not against us, and that's still running now because it's as prevalent now as it was then. And our chief puts it very nicely, really, that this is the behaviour is only by a small minority. And it really is a small minority when you look at the attacks and the statistics on it. But it just shows really how our top of our organisations are really taking a zero tolerance towards this. And I think the probably bit I didn't add on that is we do actively seek prosecution, and I'll touch on that on the Emergency Services Act a little bit later on. But that's something which we're very, very passionate about. So really from the National Chiefs Fire Council, so this is obviously the leads for our fire services in the UK. So the data they've collected from all the fire services in UK just showed that this is data from 2020-21. So it just shows that we did see a rise in England and Wales of attacks on, this is on crews, this is fire service data. So we're hovering around about, roughly about 1,000 attacks per year. 18% of those are involved objects being thrown. And on all those attacks, luckily, we only resulted in small numbers, even though 54 is not a small number in anyone's count, but it still is a small number. Obviously, we're trying to drive our town to 0 attacks and 0 injuries. The biggest part for us in South Wales is during the increase or the run-up to bonfire night. That's when we see our increase. So our statistics, about 50% of our attacks happen around this time, and they generally include things like objects or fireworks being thrown at crews, when they're dealing with bonfires, etc. But like I said, we take a complete 0 tolerance to these attacks. So hopefully you can see this. The numbers I've highlighted there. The figure of 80. This is our data for 2 years running for South Wales. So we're hovering around about 80 attacks every 2 years on our fire crews. And you can probably see from the graph that we do see spike of activities in certain areas. And we've seen that before through history data. But these particular 2 areas, we work very, very closely in collaboration with Gwent Police and South Wales Police in order to combat those areas in particular, and working with local authorities. So it's a real big multi-agency approach when we see spike in activity such as those 2 areas there. So 80 is where we are as a service every 2 years. So we're averaging about 40 a year. For the Vale of Glamorgan, I think I reported this last time. Over a 2-year period, we've had 7. In 2020-21, it was 5, and now it's reduced down to 2, which is really pleasing news. The majority of our attacks are verbal abuse. So even though people assume attacks are physical, it's not. It's also very much verbal abuse. And when we record those, that's how we present our data. So what are we doing, and what have we done really against to try and combat this particular issue? Well, the pleasing bit of legislation that came into effect in 2018 was the Assault on Emergency Services workers, and that covers fire, police, NHS, ambulance, and prison service. So for anybody who gets committed under this act, they can receive a maximum of 12 months custodial sentence and a fine, and obviously a criminal record to go along with that. So we are now got an act which we can now actively prosecute under. Again, like I said, we work very closely with South Wales Police and Gwent Police. We investigate every single occasion, incidents, and we actively seek that prosecution line. It's all based on evidence, which is something which can be quite challenging, because when our crews are faced with what we call an ambush, so they've gone into a situation where a fire has been lit deliberately in the open, and our crews have turned up, it's very, very difficult to identify people, mainly because they don't want to be identified, so they'll do everything they can to make themselves non-identifiable. So it's a really difficult one to prosecute. So what we've done really is on our frontline appliances, we've got CCTV, which is 360 around all of our frontline appliances. So whenever we get an attack on crew, we put our foot in the ball and we investigate that and seek out all CCTV and any local intelligence. Something which we've done very locally that was publicised on national news through Crime Stoppers was the introduction. Well, we've got a trial at the moment, the introduction of body-worn cameras. Something that the National Fire Chiefs Council has been pushing for a short while now. But as a service, we've taken this on board as a trial, and the initial part of the trial is about how we improve our incident commands and response to incidents. But on the back of that, we'll also capture from our crew's perspective anybody that's within a vicinity causing an attack or an insult onto our crew. So we're hoping that will all control room meetings and our joint meetings with the police and our fire control and ambulance. We're exploring video-enabled technology in fire control. And what this means is our fire control operators in the future will be able to see incidents rather than just be able to hear them through a headset. So the video-enabled technology will allow us to take control with the agreement of the individual. From someone who's made the call to us, we can take control of their mobile phone camera. That will be recorded. It helps us in terms of mobilizations, intelligent mobilizations to incidents, but it'll also capture the first stages of an incident, which is tend to be when we find where people will be if they make an attack on crew. We're in a discussion phase for that technology, but we're hoping by the end of this year, early next year, that we'll be able to introduce that. And of course, we're doing campaigns. You may have seen one last year through our social media and national, that we did one Beyond the Uniform. So we had a campaign, I'm a mother, daughter, wife, I'm a son, and so on and so forth. The campaign was really powerful, and it was about trying to make people realize we're here for their safety and their protection. Because every time we come under attack, if we're dealing with that antisocial behavior, our resources aren't being mobilized to where they should be. So that is a really quick snapshot. I hope I've got that all in time there, but I hope it's given you a flavor of where we are nationally in terms of the data in terms of attack on crews. But I hope we take some reassurance that in the Vale of Glamorgan in particular, the numbers are very, very small, and majority of those are verbal, which, you know, not appropriate, but they are verbal, not a direct physical attack on our crews. But I hope you take some comfort in that we are working collaboratively with our partners, looking at all those issues I've just pointed out to you in terms of body-worn camera, etc., that we're doing everything we can to bring those that do cause harm to our emergency service workers to justice, and hopefully end in prosecution. So I know I probably rattled through that really quickly. I hope I've covered that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Am I back on?
You are, yeah, that's lovely. Thank you very much.
I hope that was a pace everyone was with me on that. But of course, I'll take any questions that anyone may have.
No, they were appalling figures at the of the number of assaults there, but I'm glad to see that the Vale are getting better and better in the numbers. It's quite low in the Vale. Yes. So that's good news. Councillor Aviett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Christian, you said like a lot of the abuses around bonfire time. In my area, they do, certain people do it. And if there's permission from the council in a designated area, but before it happens, as councillors, could we identify the person and persuade the person to have some training with you first, because they're going to do it anyway, to have some training for safety. If the council says, well, yeah, okay, because they're going to do it anyway. I'm just wondering if we could have like somebody from, from you to give them some training first, safety training, or is it just going to always be illegal and you've got to turn up at the last moment and then put up with the abuse? Yeah.
You probably need to reframe that for me so I completely understand who we talk about training. Apologies.
The people who are going to do these bonfires, the community, because they're going to do it anyway. They do it all the time in my area, and it's always been safe. It's always been safe. The council have not really said they can't do it. I'm not saying they approve of it. But I'm just wondering, as councillors, and if we, if we know somebody in the area, in our community, who says, right, we're having the bonfire, and we hear it from social media, whatever. Yeah. I'd rather than have the safety thing. If the council said, yeah, okay, it's waste ground, and whatever, couldn't they have some training? Or are you just going to ban bonfires anyway?
Well, to answer your question, I understand where you come from. Apologies. Yeah, so to answer your question, we have got a team that work in our community safety partnership that, on the run up to bonfires, talk to community leads about the making of bonfires. So we take a zero tolerance on that, really, in terms of where the wasteland. We know it happens, and we know they're illegal bonfires, but we do our best to sort of disarm them, really, and prevent them from doing that. I'd have to really think about and speak to my leads internally about how we would go about training people. But you're absolutely right. It is a bit of a challenge, really, because if you take it down somewhere, they'll put up somewhere else, and we know it goes on. It's a difficult one. I'd have to have some time to have a think about that, if you don't mind. I will get back to you on that one.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just ask another one? So, do you think we should ban these bonfires anyway?
Well, yeah, we have some people are very they go about it in a very, very good way. Very small bonfires in areas of open land, but we've also have fires that have been close to buildings. So we've got to take a zero tolerance on it. We try and push people to go towards obviously legal ones and you know the sort of what we're trying to get to, the displays, rather than doing the bonfires themselves. So it's something which I'd have to go back internally and have a look at, if you don't mind.
Sorry, Chair, one more. Sorry. But a lot of people have a good clear out of all the beds and the old tables and stuff. And it's been going on for years, even when I was a kid. Not in this area, but, you know, I don't think they're going to stop it. But I'm thinking if there was just education around it and keeping them safe, because it's always going to go on. And I think it's, you know, I think it would be better for me, I think it'd be better to let them have it in a safe environment and be educated, because they're going to do it anyway. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
I will get back to you. I'll make contact with you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I ask Councillor Buckley for his question, please?
Evening, Chris. Before my question, I say to Julie, I thought that it's the only night of the year you were allowed to have a bonfire because it's the celebration of the gunpowder plot and everything. And I don't think Chris is worried about people having bonfires. It's just the little darlings throwing fireworks and potatoes and house bricks that they're worried about. Chris, I was wondering, do you still carry the spit kits with the crews, and have you had any success with prosecutions using them on people who spat on your crews? And
yeah, you know yourself, Ian, we introduced the spit kits now probably about 10 years ago. To my recollection, I'd have to go back and come back to you, Ian, on that, whether we've taken it into prosecution. Not that I'm aware of, but I'd have to get back to you on that one, unfortunately, because I wouldn't have that data in front of me.
I only want to make, and I can phone you again on that.
But it is something for the committee to be aware of. It's a deterrent that we have got. We went through a spell of crews being spat on, which is absolutely disgusting and unacceptable. So we issued what's called a spit kit, which is basically taking a sample as a DNA sample. So, you know, should anybody be caught, it can match them up, and if it matches what's on our uniforms, then you've got a hit. But I don't believe we've ever prosecuted. But I can get back to you on that. No problem at all.
No, and any samples you got, they will be going onto a DNA database at some time in the future. And it is truly horrific, the numbers of the assaults on the people, and you know, yourself and Stuart, who spoke before you. We just hope all your crew stay safe and well.
Yeah. I suppose going back to Julie on this one, about what Ian just mentioned then, is our concern of bonfire night are those little darlings that lure us into an area where it's not necessarily bonfires, just a small open fire, and then decide to throw fireworks and stones at the fire crew, which is completely unacceptable. But our crews are, to let you know as well, give you some rest, peace of mind. Really, they are trained to identify this, and so we have got techniques that if we do need to put a fire out, that we are able to pack up and leave quickly. But you can imagine if we had a house fire or something of that description, and we came under attack, that is really harrowing, really, for those who own the homes, especially if we had anybody we had to rescue. So, we do take this very seriously. And like I said at the beginning of this presentation, our chiefs and chief constables have a very, very zero tolerance to this type of behaviour.
Good, thank you, Christian. Christian, we've got agenda item 8 down as your presentation, and 7 fire and rescue. Did you want to add anything? Did you have another report or anything to add to what you've presented tonight, just for clarification, really?
No, I haven't. I'll present next time for data, just to give you some reassurance. I know last time presented, we did see some spike of activities in Vale of Glamorgan. I have had a look at the data before coming here tonight, and we would say we're reasonably stable in terms of activity. There's no incidents of note in particular for the Vale of Glamorgan. So in terms of that, there's nothing really to present in terms of data, but I will certainly next time round give you a full.
No, that's excellent. No, thank you very much. We appreciate your time with us, and yeah, we're glad the Vale are well behaved. Okay, Christian, you're free to go.
Thank you ever so much, and thank you
very much. We look forward to seeing you in the next meeting.
Thank you very much. Thanks, bye.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, are we happy for the committee to note agenda item 7 and note the presentation for agenda item 8?
Yeah, I'm happy. Is everybody happy to go along with that? Yeah, I see no disconcern. Yeah. Thank you, Amy.
Are you happy for me to say moved by Councillor Aviett and seconded by Councillor Buckley?
Very happy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 9, I believe, Amy, you're presenting this report of the Chief Executive, nominations for representatives for town and community councils for the Public Service Board, Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee and the Strong Communities Fund Evaluation Panel.
Thank you, Chair. Awards go for the longest report title ever, I think, on that one. Thank you very much, committee. Yes, I am taking this report, but just obviously, as you're aware, I am a member of Democratic Services. So my team leader, Karen Bowen, compiles this report together, but it is a report that is relates to service areas and councils and other officers in other various parts of the council. So I wouldn't say I'm the ownership of it, but I'm certainly the custodian for tonight to present it to you. It is a very simple procedural report for you this evening, in which we are simply trying to nominate representatives as set out in the report for each of the committees and boards that are on there. So if I could draw members' attention to the representations that are set out on page 2. So we need to appoint a representative to sit on the Public Services Board, and that would be for a period of 2 years, obviously up until July 2024. We hopefully would also appoint a representative for to the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee up until the next local government elections, which is in 2027. And as some of our members will be aware, the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee is also a committee that meets on a quarterly basis, and that the representative would become a member of that committee and included in that process appropriately. And then the final recommendation 3 is to appoint a representative to sit on the Strong Communities Fund Evaluation Panel, again up until the next local government elections. Just to point out, with regards to the Strong Communities Fund Panel, we're actually looking for 2 reps on that one. We're looking from 1 representative from a town and community town council and 1 from a community council. So this evening, if possible, I would like to come away with 4 names for the representatives for those 3 committees / bodies, please.
Okay, so this is open to anybody. Councillor Hodges.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move Councillor Shirley Hodges for a Public Service Board nomination. She represents Barry Town Council, has for a number of years, and is very popular with the public.
Excellent. Have I got a seconder for that?
I'll second that. Councillor Aviett.
Lovely. Thank you ever so much, Julie. Do I have any other nominations, or do I have to ask for other nominations, Amy? I'm not sure.
Yes, please, Chair. Yes.
Yeah, if we have any other nominations, Councillor Cuddy.
Well, I'm happy to continue. I was the existing rep on the Public Service Board, and I've followed its development and the evolution of our participation in that board. and the new wellbeing plan will give the opportunity to further the development of that relationship. It's been quite difficult to relate to the 5 statutory members who, of course, have budgets and fairly strict statutory obligations, and how they should we should join with them. The wellbeing plan for the future is going to be drawn, I think, more specifically to include actions that we can participate in. I won't go into any further than that.
Okay, so you're nominating yourself, Councillor Cuddy.
I believe it says you can.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I just need a seconder for that nomination, please. Councillor Buckley, you'll second it. Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson.
I'm going to second that as well. I did have my hand up before.
Oh, sorry.
But no worries. No worries.
Okay, 2 hands and I didn't know which one came first. Okay, Amy, we have any other nominations? I've got 2 nominations. Any other nominations? No. Amy, do we need to vote on this?
Yes, we do, please, Chair. Because you have 2 nominations on the table, if we could go through the elected members, and I think it would also be appropriate to go through the Town and Community Council members present this evening as well. So if we could, on your front sheet of your agenda, you do have the list of elected members for you to go through, Chair. And then I can take you through the Town and Community Council reps that are on with us this evening, if that's okay. We'll take a vote from each person, which nomination they are voting for, either Councillor Shirley Hodges or Councillor Michael Cuddy.
Okay, so if I call out the councillors, the available Morgan councillors, and you can say which name you would like to nominate, please. Councillor Asprey.
Councillor Hodges, please.
Councillor Aviett.
Councillor Hodges.
Councillor Birch.
Councillor Cuddy.
Councillor Campbell.
Councillor Hodges.
Councillor Cave. Do we have Councillor Cave here, please? No. Councillor Hayne.
Councillor Cave is connected, Chair.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But I think she was muted at the moment. So can we come
I'll
back?
come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Haynes. Do we have Councillor Haynes?
This is correct.
No. Councillor Hodges.
Councillor Hodges.
Councillor Lynch Wilson.
Councillor Cuddy.
Councillor Payne.
Councillor Payne isn't with us, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Perks.
Councillor Cuddy.
And Councillor Thomas. I don't think he's here either, is he?
He's not with us, Chair. No.
No.
And you're going to ask me.
Who's you?
Wilson. Councillor Wilson.
I haven't got you down. Oh, yes, you're under me. Councillor Wilson. I haven't done this before. I'm under pressure here.
That's okay.
I won't ask then, Chair, either.
What did you say, Councillor Wilson?
No, Councillor Buckley said something there, not me.
Yeah.
I'm going to back Councillor Cuddy if you're asking me anyway.
Yes, I'm asking you. There we go.
Thank you.
And now, Amy, I haven't got a list here of the current.
That's okay, Chair. If I can just clarify, Councillor Buckley, you're not a member of the committee. So that's why the Chair hasn't invited you to vote on the matter. And can I take your vote as well, Chair, before we move forward?
Councillor Hodges.
Okay. And can I just check, Councillor Cave? Are you able to, is Councillor Cave still with us, or she seems to have disconnected now?
Right, yeah.
So we can't take the vote on Councillor Cave?
Sorry, could I just check as well as Councillor Iannucci? I think I am a member of the committee, but can I double check?
You're not a member of the committee, Councillor Yanucci.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay.
You're a town or community representative, I think.
I don't believe Councillor Yanucci is. She's here as an observing Vale of Glamorgan elected member.
Ah, right. There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's okay, no problem. So if I could run through the Town and Community Council reps now, Chair, if that's okay, because I have a note of who's with us.
Yeah.
So obviously, so starting with Councillor Shirley Hodges for Barry Town Council.
Councillor Hodges.
Thank you. Bear with me.
I'm coming out now.
Okay. Councillor John Andrew for Cowbridge, please.
Councillor Cuddy.
Councillor Cuddy for Penarth. Yourself, I assume, Councillor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Brian Morris for Colwinston, please.
Councillor Hodges.
Thank you. Dr. Rees for Llancarvan, please.
Sorry, Councillor Cuddy.
Okay. Councillor Reid for Llangarn, please.
Councillor Cuddy.
Thank you. Councillor Naresberg for Llanmaes, please.
Councillor Hodges.
Mrs. Marks for Mickleston Lepit with Leckwith, please.
Councillor Hodges.
Councillor Toker for St Athan, please.
Councillor Cuddy.
Councillor Howells for St George's and St Bride's Super Ely, please.
Councillor Cuddy.
Councillor Perry for St Nicholas and Bonvilston, please.
Hi, Councillor Hodges.
And Councillor Parry for Sully and Lavernock, please.
Councillor Hodges.
And Councillor Hawkins for Wick, please.
Councillor Cuddy, please.
Okay, can I just confirm, please, that there are no other Town and Community Council representatives that I haven't asked for a vote?
Me.
Yeah, me,
Sorry, can I take Councillor Gerwin Thomas first then, please?
Yeah, I would vote for Councillor Cuddy, but as the chair voted, we're both in the same council. Does that matter?
Yes, it's only one vote per council.
Well, okay, then I'll leave that with the chair then.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. And sorry, there was a secondary, was that?
Yeah, Georgina Kellen, Pendoilen.
Thank you. And what was your vote, please, Councillor?
Councillor Hodges.
And Amy, we've got Councillor Cave is back online.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Cave, can you hear us? Are you able to place your vote, please?
Yes, I can hear you now. So it's Councillor Hodges.
Okay, so last call, please. Are there any other individuals who haven't placed their vote?
I've got Georgina Callan's hand up. Is that a legacy hand? Or did you want to speak, Georgina?
No, sorry, I've got to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so by my calculation, votes for Councillor Hodges are 13. Votes for Councillor Cuddy are 11. Oh. Therefore, Councillor Hodges is duly elected as the representative for the Public Service Board.
Lovely, thank you very much. Congratulations, Councillor Hodges, and I'm very sorry, Councillor Cuddy. Thank you.
Thank you
Can
very
I just
much.
say, Councillor Cuddy as well, thank you for the work that you have done. I know you've sat on it for some years, so thank you very much for the work you have done on it. Thank you.
sorry to butt in, but I was just going to say that to thank Councillor Cuddy as well for his hard work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
I want to make a point. I just want a bit of clarification here, Amy, because I understand that, as you said in your presentation earlier, we have two different parties here, don't we? Because what you've done it seems to be a combined total. So I would like the figures separated out for the people who can actually vote in terms of votes, because my understanding is if you're a TC Town and Community Council representative, then you're basically a consultee, but you don't have a voting right, if you see what I mean. Only that belongs to Vale Glamorgan members.
Yes, I respect what you're saying, Councillor Wilson. With regards to just elected member votes, Councillor Shirley Hodges is still duly elected as she had 7 votes and Councillor Cuddy had 4.
Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Perry.
Yeah, my comment is I'm just a little bit concerned that nobody knows where they should be if they're actually members of this committee. Or, yeah, we seem to have multiple members from some councils, and it seems to be a bit confused as to who is actually in the room. And maybe some people who are here should not be actually here. So it does seem a little bit confused from what's just happened in the last few minutes.
I can assure you, Council, I've been monitoring the attendance of who we have this year. We do sometimes have substitutes who are not necessarily the representative, but I can assure you that we do have everybody who is here this evening should be here. And elected members who are in observance are able to do so as an elected member of the Council.
Okay, thanks, Amy.
Councillor Wilson, is that a legacy hand?
No, just a clarification that Amy, so I don't need to say anything. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, well, that was good. The next one is to invite a representative to sit on the Vale Council's Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee. This is for 5 years. Do I have a nomination, please? Councillor Perry, are you coming in there, or is that a legacy hand?
I'm being a legacy, sorry.
That's okay. There we go. So we're looking for a nomination now for the voluntary sector. Do I have a nomination, please? Councillor Hawkins.
Sorry, I was going to self-nominate if that's allowed.
You can self-nominate, that's fine. I just have to have a seconder for that. So could I have a seconder? I think
Sandra Perks seconded.
Sandra Perks has seconded. Thank you, Sandra. There we go. So congratulations. And the third one.
Can I just double check? Just to double check, there are definitely no other nominations for that.
Sorry, any other nominations? No yellow hands, no hands waving. No, I think that was the only one. Thank you, Amy.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Hawkins is duly elected.
And a representative for a town council rep on the community council. We need a town representative and a community one. Councillor Cave, please.
Yes, Chair. This is for the Stronger Communities Evaluation Panel, is it?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I'd like to nominate Dave Reed from Clangarn Community Council.
Okay, thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for Dave Reed? Councillor Wilson?
It's not a seconder, it's proposing someone else.
Okay, can I have a seconder, Councillor Thomas? Yeah, you're happy to second the nomination for Dave Reed? Yeah. You're muted.
Chair, if I may, just for clarity, could I have a seconder, because we have a nomination from Councillor Cave, who is an elected member. Could I have a seconder who is an elected member, please?
Okay, so it has to be an elected member. Councillor Wilson, I think you'll want that for no. Okay, got a lot of hands coming and going here. So we've got a nomination for Dave Reed by Councillor Cave. We need a Vale of Glamorgan member to second that. So have I got a Vale of Glamorgan seconder? So Councillor Hodges.
Yeah, happy to second that.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor. So, and now I'm open to nominations. Any other nominations? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'd like to propose Councillor Cuddy.
I'll second that. Councillor Perks.
Councillor Cuddy, are you happy for your name to go forward?
This is for which?
This is for the Town Council representative on the Stronger Communities Fund evaluation. Yeah. Okay.
Fine.
So
yeah.
we've got a name and we've got a seconder. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
You said Town Council.
We need two.
Yes. So
Community Council is David Reid, and Town Council, Penarth Town Council would be Councillor Cuddy.
Yeah. So thank you for the clarification.
No problem. There we go. Have we got any other nominations? Councillor Cave, is that a legacy hand?
Yes, it is, Chair. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Oh, where have I gone? Ooh, there we go. Something happened then. Okay, so are you happy with that, Amy? We've got
yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, you
community,
yeah,
and a town proposed and seconded.
Yes, you've only had single nominations. So if there's no dissent from the committee, then both Councillor Reid and Councillor Cuddy are duly elected.
Excellent. Thank you all for that. It's well worth sitting on some of these committees, and I think the Stronger Community ones is particularly valuable. Right, going back to agenda item number 10. It's a request for consideration from St Nicholas with Bonvilston Community Council on S106 money, and this is being presented by Charlotte Rain. Hi Charlotte, thank you.
Good evening everyone. We received a request back in March for an issue to be considered by the planning department, and that was that section 106 money is primarily directed at affordable housing, more housing with little left for infrastructural facilities. The reason stated for the request was that with the LDP being reviewed, local development plan being reviewed, this is a good time for consideration on what section 106 is used for. And there are many complaints from residents of the Vale of Glamorgan that new development is not bringing the required infrastructure or facilities. I hope you've had time to take a look at the report. I won't go through it line by line because it is quite detailed, but the report goes through the legislative context for section 106 and the legislation that we are bound by. Some of that legislation comprises the community infrastructure regulations, which requires planning obligations to be fair, reasonable, directly related to a development, necessary to make a development acceptable in planning terms. Then the report goes further on to the planning policy context. It sets out the national context, which is set out in Future Wales, which is the National Development Plan. It sets out the land use planning policies that were set by Welsh Government. It also sets out the delivering affordable housing guidance that promotes affordable housing and the delivery of affordable housing. And then it moves on to the local context, planning policy context. So the Vale of Glamorgan's adopted local development plan. And just the main key policies in that are set out in paragraph 1.13 and 1.14 onwards in relation to affordable housing and infrastructure. In summary, the council has a requirement to deliver affordable housing, and there is a target within the LDP of 3,252 affordable dwellings during the planned period. In addition to that, there's other infrastructure that's required to be delivered during the planned period. So highways improvements, community infrastructure, new schools, etc. And our latest annual monitoring report, which was prepared 2020 to 21, which is currently being updated for the period 21-22, shows that good progress is being made regarding the current LDP strategy and objectives, particularly in relation to affordable housing, infrastructure and facilities. It goes on to provide details of the local policy framework in relation to supplementary planning guidance, so what we seek from new developments. It goes into some detail on that. And then it basically goes further to talk about from paragraph 1.17 onwards, the replacement local development plan. You will have probably seen that we are currently out for candidate sites. So the local development plan is being reviewed, and a replacement plan will be developed over the next 4 years, and it will cover the period 2021 to 2036. There is also reference to the local housing market assessments within the report, which basically sets out that there is a huge demand in the Vale of Glamorgan for additional affordable housing units per annum. The latest assessment showed that we need an additional 1,205 units per year to meet the current demand. So that is actually more than we're building in total. So yeah, significant increase in the number of affordable housing units required at the moment due to a number of issues. And despite the increase in the number of affordable housing houses being delivered through the planning system or through social housing grant, so that's registered social landlord-led schemes, there remains that significant need within the Vale of Glamorgan. So that sets out the context and background. The issues are then discussed in section 2 of the report, and it goes into some detail about the issue raised by St Nicholas with Bombleston Community Council. So I've recently just circulated the annual section 106 report for 21-22 to all elected members and town and community councils, and that is available on the website to view. The report highlights the progress on section 106. It looks at all the schemes that are being delivered at the moment with section 106. And it sets out the section 106 account in full. So that really does go into a lot of detail about this. But one of the key things to flag is that at the 31st of March of this year, the council had £18,738,499 in the section 106 account, of which 5.4 million was for affordable housing, representing approximately 29% of the account. So it's not correct to say that there is little left for infrastructural facilities. As over 70% of the section 106 account is legally defined for other uses such as community facilities, education and sustainable transport. And the report does go into some detail, the annual report does go into some detail about schemes that are being delivered with that. It also goes into some detail about the different types of schemes that are being delivered with match funding. So, for example, Ogmore by Sea Village Hall was a predominantly section 106 driven scheme, but if the total project cost, for example, was 634,000 plus, and 332,000 of that was from section 106, and the rest was secured via the community association via other means. So section 106 is a very big part of securing infrastructure and facilities, but it is not the only mechanism. And the committee report goes into some detail about that. It is accepted that there are instances where development cannot provide the full policy requirements for affordable housing and planning obligations, and that may well be why St Nicholas and Bombleston Community Council feel that the policies aren't working very well. They are usually down to issues in relation to viability, individual site constraints, and the local development plan must acknowledge those issues. Well, it does acknowledge those issues are a material planning consideration in the assessment of a planning application, so they have to be considered. And when planning obligations and affordable housing cannot be met in full as part of the planning application, we must consider that in the planning balance. And the officer report dealing with that planning application will go into that in some detail as to the acceptability of the scheme based upon all of those matters. As I said, the council does not solely rely on Section 106 contributions to deliver infrastructure and facilities. There are other means of delivering such infrastructure and facilities. For example, the 21st Century Schools programme, that's £148 million amalgamation of funds. The active travel funding comes from Welsh Government. There are other ways to secure infrastructure that aren't solely reliant upon Section 106. I would use this opportunity to promote the Strong Communities Grant Fund, which offers grants to community groups in the voluntary sector, town and community councils, up to a maximum of 25,000. The round is due to open next week. I would highly recommend if there are community councils that would like to put schemes forward to start having those conversations with my colleagues in regeneration. And just to conclude, really, the adopted LDP is being reviewed, and as part of that review process, we will look at all of the LDP policies again in respect of affordable housing and infrastructure. So it does provide an opportunity to review them. However, in light of the need for affordable housing, it's highly unlikely that the emphasis upon affordable housing will change given the national policy context and also the local position. And it will continuously be reviewed over the next 4 years in terms of viability to ensure that the most appropriate policy approach is taken. And then I think that is probably it. And if there are any questions, happy to take those.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Does the member for St Nicholas and Bonvilston Community Council wish to ask a question on that? I believe that's Councillor Perry. Yes, Councillor Perry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, here I come. There was one interesting piece of information there in particular, and that was 1,205 new units per year to meet demand, but there was no time limit on that. So that's the first one. And the second one, which is the key to why we raised this, is yes, there are problems, in particularly in Bonvilston, with making a housing scheme viable, which brought money down, and money went to a sewage works rather than more interesting things for a community. We get a potential new development in Bonvilston, and we've had lots of individual new houses built, and all the S106 money from those has gone onto affordable housing. And then we have a larger development, and because it was originally going to bring less than 10 additional dwellings, again, all that money would go into affordable housing. And perhaps for some more rural communities where they haven't had the big developments, it means that any ad hoc houses they get, 100% of all their S106 money will be going into affordable housing. So you get areas where you get S106 for sustainable transport, for education and nice things. And of course, housing is important, but in smaller rural communities, because of that ceiling, where you go past 10 additional dwellings, all your S106 money goes into the affordable housing pot when there are certain things that are desperately needed within those communities. And with Bonvilston clearly needs wider footways and a reduced speed limit, but there's no money for that. So that was the real reason why we brought it forward. But I'd be really interested to hear other people's views on that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Perry.
Can I just come back then?
Yeah.
So in terms of the data in the local housing market assessment, that's at 1.20 of the report, and that sets out that the additional 1,205 units for affordable housing per year for the next 5 years. The local housing market assessment is done every 2 years, so that has provided the picture for the next 5 years based upon the last 2 years, and it's a point in the sand where the data is collected. So yeah, please do take a read of that document. That is a council adopted document, and that is, that demonstrates our need in the Vale of Glamorgan, and that will be updated in due course to also inform the replacement local development plan. In terms of the Bonvilston development, I won't go into detail about that now, but the officer's report on the planning application will go into extensive detail on that and why there were viability issues on that development and why it was still considered acceptable. on the whole. In terms of your point in respect of rural developments not levering in, say, sustainable transport contributions, etc., I draw your attention to 1.3 in the report, which basically sets out the community infrastructure regulations. And what's very tricky is that basically puts a statutory obligation on the council to ensure that any obligations are fair and reasonably related in scale inclined to a development and necessary to make a development acceptable in planning terms. So it'd be very difficult to justify extensive new footpaths on the back of 1 or 2 dwellings. Our policies just would not stack up again. We wouldn't be able to justify that or legally justify it anyway in light of that legislation. So that makes it, that's why we set thresholds for other types of infrastructure at 5 for public open space and 10 onwards for others. Just because we are bound by that legislation, it has to be reasonable. So that I hope that provides some explanation in respect of that. Were there any other questions?
Have we got any other questions for Charlotte on that? Councillor Cuddy. You're on, yeah.
Yeah, I'm now off mute, sorry about that. Yeah, this is not directly applicable to the issue being discussed, but a broader one, and that's the new replacement LDP, and that's the engagement of the community throughout the process. Now, you discussed earlier on the request for candidate sites. I just wondered if there is what opportunity there is for the community or representatives of the community to be engaged. One of the things you've got to do, besides your housing assessment, is a strategic viability assessment. Now, I think Ian has not. We've mentioned viability in passing, but it's not it's not a scientific thing necessarily. Part of the exercise is to do with the degree of profit which the developer or builder will get in a scheme. Now, I know there are constraints, and confidentiality applies to the detail and individual sites, but it certainly doesn't seem to me that the community should be excluded from the general discussion of the general quantity of profit in these discussions about the strategic viability. The development plans manual you'll be aware of does talk about a group being formed to discuss the strategic issue.
I can see Lucy's got her hand up, and basically she'll be able to provide more information on the replacement LDP and the various community involvement processes within that, which was included within our delivery agreement recently adopted by the council and submitted to Welsh Government, and that's all on our website. So Lucy will be able to give you a bit more information on that. In terms of viability and making that publicly available, as part of the LDP background evidence, that was all made available previously, and going forward it will be. And in terms of individual sites, we've actually had legal advice recently, and the new Planning Policy Wales, which was released last year, has changed that now, so that unless there is a very strong commercially sensitive issue, that is now all in the public domain, and it is all being released as a matter of course now. And there is an exercise where we do have to check that commercially sensitiveness around it, but it should all now be in the public domain. So when individual sites do have their viability issues, that will now all be exported onto our planning register as a matter of course with planning applications. And as I said, with the LDP review, all viability will be in the public domain again. So yeah, Lucy, sorry.
Thanks, Charlotte. I just wanted to pick up on the sort of the community involvement side of things, Councillor Cuddy. Just so that you're all aware, the first stage of the replacement LDP process is the preparation of a delivery agreement. And we did this a few months back and consulted on it. And the delivery agreement includes a timetable for preparing the local development plan, and also a community involvement strategy, which Charlotte mentioned. So the CIS basically sets out how, when and who we're going to engage with the community and the statutory consultancies, etc., during the process. So that document was reported to full council and adopted, or approved I should say, by Welsh Government on the 4th of May, and it is available on the website if people would like to have a look at it. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Lucy. Councillor Perry, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, just another quick question, really.
Yeah.
Back in 2012, the Vale Council was talking about a community infrastructure levy, which other councils can do, and there was back then the intention for the Vale Glamorgan Council to also charge a community infrastructure levy, which is of course what I've been talking about, but that's never happened, and I'm just wondering if it will happen in the future, or if we're going to continue just charging S106.
Just by way of background, the Welsh Government had devolved powers in respect of the community infrastructure levy regulations in, oh, gosh, it feels like last year, but it was probably 2018, 2019. And as a consequence, they are, as part of their work programme, they are looking to review that, how that, what will be the implications of that for Wales. So at this stage, we have put our community infrastructure levy into an abeyance, because it would seem an abortive works to look at that again when that potential devolved powers may change it. And in England that has recently changed. They're looking at changing the way the community infrastructure levy works, and I suspect Welsh Government will possibly want to do the same. But what I would just add is that with the community infrastructure levy, because it is a flat rate per square metre, there isn't the ability to negotiate, and so at the examination point, it has to be a very relatively guarded pound per square metre to begin with, because it has to encompass all types of development. Whereas our SPG, I would say, is quite ambitious. We've got figures in there where per dwelling they could equal quite substantial sums, and in some areas where viability is strong, such as Cowbridge, Surrey, etc., we have we're receiving large contributions, and I'm not sure whether we as the Vale of Glamorgan would receive the same level of community infrastructure levy as we do Section 106. That's just a personal take on it. At the moment, Section 106 is working very well for the Vale, because it isn't that rigid pound per square metre, which would have to be and as part of the examination, obviously the development industry would put all their evidence on the table and make it want that figure to be as low as possible, and the inspector would have to take a pragmatic stance over it. So yeah, it's I would say the Vale is doing very well off Section 106, and I don't necessarily think by not having a community infrastructure levy that it's actually not achieving the same. Lovely. Also, just to note with the community infrastructure levy is that what the difference is that it means that the money can be pooled into one very big project across the whole Vale of Glamorgan. So whilst the money you're raising could be in St Nicholas, that money actually could be spent anywhere. It doesn't have to be spent in St Nicholas, whereas the money you're raising at the moment in St Nicholas has to be spent serving the residents of St Nicholas. I hope that makes sense. So it's more site specific.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Yes, thank you, Charlotte, for your wide-ranging report on what I'd like to reflect on are actually a lot of barriers to community achievement of community desires. And I'd like to know that there's some feedback to the Welsh Office that says some of your statutory requirements are in conflict with others, and very few of them actually achieve what local communities want to achieve with that money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you want to come back on that, Charlotte, or shall we go to the last question from Mr. Cuddy, Councillor Cuddy?
It was just to say, really, I mean, I don't think the legislation, even if we did make a request, would change that much, because the requirement is that it needs to be reasonable in scale. And the problem is, one dwelling is not going to generate the sums that town and community councils are looking for. They're going to, you know, to deliver the infrastructure that Councillor Perry's referring to, you know, it's potentially tens of thousands, which the one dwelling is not going to generate. So I'm not sure whether that legislational change would actually enhance that, unfortunately.
Can I come back to you on that then? It seems you've got a painful foot. If money raised in one place can be spent somewhere else, why do you refer to small developments not being self-funding? That seems to be nonsensical.
Sorry, I'm a bit confused as to
You've
what
just
you mean.
said that one house won't generate the money for a community's ambition. Am I right in that? But you've also said that money generated by a development in one place does not necessarily have to be used in that place.
No, that's in respect to community infrastructure levy. So that's a slightly different thing. So Councillor Perry asked me a question specifically in relation to the community infrastructure levy. So that's what I was just responding to when I said it doesn't have to be spent in the same ward. I'm talking about section 106 now. Sorry, it is confusing. So that is what the Vale of Glamorgan operate using. I would really recommend the documents that I've put in the report. The one key document, I would not expect you to read all of them, but the one key document is the Supplementary Planning Guidance on Planning Obligations. That document provides a really good overview in terms of section 106 in the Vale, how it operates, why it is as it is, how the sums have been calculated, and is our negotiating position going forward with developers. So I'd really recommend you taking a quick squint of that if you'd like to know more on that, because I think it would probably provide a bit more clarity.
Thank you, Charlotte. And Councillor Cuddy, a quick question, please, and then we can move on. Thank you.
Yes, a quick question. Strategic viability assessment, is that going to be published? Are you going to do one?
Yeah, we have to do a strategic viability assessment to support the local development plan, and actually now, as part of the replacement local development plan, even at candidate site stages, they have to submit a level of viability assessment as well. Lucy, I'm not sure whether they'll be published. I'm sure you'll be able to clarify that. But yeah, everything now, the Welsh Government's advice in PPW is that it should be an open and transparent book approach. So yes, going forward, historically we were bound by the environmental regulations, which effectively made it a bit more questions around the disclosure of viability, whereas now Welsh Government have made it quite clear that is to be released.
Okay.
Sorry, Lucy.
Yeah, I think as Charlotte said, it's meant to be a sort of an open book, transparent approach. So the intention is to make all of that information publicly available.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Charlotte, for your presentation, and thank you, Lucy, for assisting. Thank you very much. The recommendation is that the Community Liaison Committee note the contents of this report. Is everybody happy to note the contents, please? There we go. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to agenda item 11, request for consideration from Lantwick Major Town Council tree preservation orders. I believe we've got Ian Robinson presenting this. Good evening, Ian.
Evening, Chair, and evening, everybody. Sorry, can I just add one? This is not what I'm here for, but I'll just add one last thing on the viability information. Just to give councillors here the full picture. We couldn't guarantee that viability information will always be made public. And what I'm talking about there is if there's a scenario where we feel that it should be made public and there doesn't exist the rationale to keep it private, if the developer maintains that they don't want it submitted, I would envisage that our stance would be that we would treat that information as not not being submitted, so we wouldn't let the developer rely upon it. So if it's submitted and they say no, this must be confidential, but we are of the view that there's no good reason why it shouldn't be, then we wouldn't be able to take it into account in the assessment, and we would treat the application as if the information hadn't been submitted. But I just wanted to sort of just refer to that scenario where this information might exist, but we might not publicise it, but we certainly wouldn't then take it into account, and it wouldn't then be to the applicant's benefit in that assessment. Anyway, sorry, that's not what I'm
No, thank you very
not what
much.
I'm here for, but I just wanted to add it.
Thank you.
Yes, what I am here for is to talk about protected trees. So the report has been circulated. Like Charlotte, I'll run through sort of the main points, but without reading it out word for word, because I'm sure you will have read it. But the purpose of the report is to respond to Llantrip Major Town Council's request, and the reason for the request is that the Town Council have been frustrated that they have been unable to comment on TPO applications within the town, and feel that a large percentage of trees in the conservation area have been felled. With reference to the Town Council's wellbeing objectives regarding the environment and conservation, the council feel that it's an area that the council should be able to address. And the council have concerns regarding the number of trees felled within the town, but also within the Vale. So the report firstly sets out the legislative framework, and that's principally the Town and Country Planning Act, which, I mean, there's a number of provisions in the Act relating to trees, but in the main, it gives councils the ability to make tree preservation orders, and then the Tree Regulations 1999 make certain further provisions relating to how that is done, and then the 2012 amendments to the regulations make some specific provisions in terms of the information required to accompany an application when somebody wants to carry out work to a tree. So I set those out in the report. Section 198 of the Town and Country Planning Act says that if it appears to a local planning authority that it is expedient in the interests of amenity to make provision for the preservation of trees or woodlands in their area, they may for that purpose make an order with respect to such trees, groups of trees or woodlands. And then section 212 also affords protection to trees in conservation areas and sets out the notification procedures required before someone can carry out work to trees in a conservation area. In terms of planning policy context, this is obviously a key thing within Future Wales, which is the national plan, and that, particularly in respect of climate change and biodiversity. It's also key within Planning Policy Wales, the Vale's adopted local development plan, both in the main objectives and through a number of the policies. And then we have specifically a piece of supplementary planning guidance on trees, woodlands, hedgerows and development, and that's the document that really gets into detail about how these things should be assessed, assessing whether the tree warrants a TPO, things we'll take into account, and if trees are being removed, the ratio of replanting that we expect, which is in most cases a minimum of 2 to 1, so where 1 is going, 2 to be replacing it. We also have a draft tree strategy, and obviously, as you can imagine, trees are going to be a focal point of the replacement local development plan going forward. Just specifically in respect of the question before us this evening, I can give you some figures. I think that's probably a good way of sort of illustrating how many applications we received and what's happened with them. So far in 2022, the council has received 36 applications for works. The remainder of the 36 have either been approved or awaiting determination, and of the 4 in Llantrip Major, 1 was part approved, part refused in the way I just described. 1 has not yet been determined, and when I wrote the report, we were still waiting for 2 to be registered because they were recently received. In 2021, the council received 84 applications for works to TPO trees, 5 in Llantrip Major. Of the 5, 3 were refused, either for minor works to trees or removal of dead and decaying trees, and 2 were withdrawn. I have to make a note here regarding appeals. So in the last 13 years, 12 and a half, 13 years, the council has received notification of 13 appeals against decisions to refuse works to TPO trees. 11 of those appeals were dismissed, whereby the planning inspector agreed that there wasn't justification for the works, and in 2 of those cases the inspector allowed the works. Most recently, this isn't in Landrett Major, but it's not too far away, the example I'm giving here. The most recent appeal we successfully defended regarding felling of several trees alongside Landrett Major Road between Landrett and Cowbridge, adjacent to a property called Pheasant House, where the applicant wanted to remove a series of mature trees alongside the road. And we felt that it wasn't justified. They were trees that contributed significantly to the amenity of the area, and the council's highway section were consulted. They agreed that the trees weren't posing a danger to highway safety, albeit they did overhang the road to some degree. So we refused that, and that appeal was dismissed. I've noted here that the Town and Country Planning Act and tree regs do not require consultation with neighbouring properties, local members or town and community councils. The exception there is that TPO tree applications on council-owned land are required to be advertised on site for 21 days, but that publicity requirement doesn't exist for other TPO applications. Notwithstanding that, the TPO applications we receive are published on the council's website, and using the search fields, you can search by application type and area. So by typing in TPO, it'll bring up all the TPO applications, and you can search by ward or with a keyword like Landtwit. Any comments we receive, we would consider as part of the assessment. The local planning authority requires applications for works to TPO trees to be accompanied by a statement of reasons for the proposed work, and usually a report by a tree professional. The reason I say usually is because in some cases there may be a very good justification for removal that's quite clear to us without needing the support of a tree report, but they are submitted and required in the bulk of cases. If an application is not accompanied by adequate justification, then that's likely to result in the refusal of the application. And if there is a justification cited, but it's not acceptable, such as regular maintenance being caused by having to collect drop leaves, then that would lead to the application being refused. I've just put some examples here of what may be acceptable justifications in some cases. So, for example, if they're necessary in the interest of the health of the tree, if the tree is evidenced to be causing damage to property, or if it poses a safety risk. So, for example, if it is causing damage to property, the council can be liable for that if we refuse the application and the tree goes on to do significant damage. If the application is considered to be justified and acceptable, the planning authority generally requires replanting at a ratio of 2 trees per 1 lost. Sometimes there may be insufficient space within a site to plant the trees, and that might be part of the reason why it's acceptable to remove the tree in the first place. If the tree is significantly outgrowing its context and causing damage, it wouldn't generally be good practice to then replant a tree in the same location if it's going to cause the same issues. So we can require a financial contribution to pay for trees to be planted on council land near to the site. That's just a run through the main points in the report, but I'm conscious there's probably going to be a few questions relating to specific issues. So if you're happy, Chair, that we open up for that now and go from there.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that, Ian. Can I go to the representative for Landrett Major Town Council and ask if he wanted to ask any questions?
Yes, thank you for that, Ian. A very comprehensive answer to that. But I was probably interested in just one line in there, that chopping down trees doesn't require consultation. Now, all we're asking really is to give us a heads up on any trees that are being chopped down and allow us to comment. Now, I know that I understand that on the website, but that means going into the website and searching for it. Now, when you could easily email our town clerk and tell her, and I don't think that's too much to ask. That we are allowed to comment on it.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not saying you can't comment on it, and I respect you saying it's easy enough for that to happen. I guess I would just ask, with respect to bear in mind that we have complex and significant volume of consultation as required statutorily in respect of the 2,000 plus applications we receive, and it's not simply an easy case of adding something ad hoc that's not statutory onto that. It's further process and it's further work, and I'm not saying it's not something we could look at, but it's not something, it's something that's not required by legislation for a reason, because it's generally a technical and, strictly speaking, not a subjective judgment, and that's why we require work, a report from somebody qualified to to judge it, and that's why we make that kind of fairly objective judgment. It's not like a planning application for a new house in the street, and there might be a lot of subjectivity about the kind of the acceptability depending on design and character, and an opinion is not really an opinion-based judgment. I'm always concerned to make commitments to consult and notify people in a non-statutory way, because it's not necessarily a reliable system. Personally, I think the process of searching on the website, I don't think it's particularly onerous. I mean, you could do it as often as you like. I can say I will endeavour to do it. What I just want to ensure is that it's not treated as a statutory process, and it's something that I say I will give thought to, and I will speak to our support team manager who runs our processes, and I will try and devise a way of giving you that heads up in a reliable way. But I'm nervous about saying categorically you will always be notified about all trees in a tree application to Land Major, and not least because it would be very easy then for every community council or town council area to ask for the same, and before you know it, then we have to do that process, which is you may not think it seems like much of a burden, but it is. We are an extremely busy department with all of the ever-growing statutory processes that we have to do, and there is a time and a cost associated with adding to that. And individually, you might think each instance is not significant, but actually it does build up, and I have to then justify to the people in my team why I'm asking them to do more when they're already very much up against it with their statutory duties. But I'm certainly happy to consider it further and see if we can think of a way to do it which is reliable and isn't overly burdensome.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I fully understand. But I hope you understand as well that we are answerable to the residents, and they do ask us questions on it, and we have to find answers to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. No further questions to Ian.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. Thank you, Ian. Do I have any other questions? I can't see any raised yellow hands or anybody waving at me, so I think that is all. Thank you very much, Ian. Very informative.
Thank you. Can I just clarify before I go? Once I've had the opportunity to look at this, shall I go back through Dawn at the town council, or how do you want me to come back to you? Do you want me to come back to you directly, Councillor Thomas, given that you've requested this?
Dawn or Ruth, town clerk or deputy will be fine.
Fantastic. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Ian.
Lovely. Okay, thank you ever so much. And that brings me to the end of this agenda. Just leaves me to say that please can I remind all town and community council representatives that request for consideration forms are available via Democratic Services should you wish to raise a matter. And I think if I could just remind you that any clarification on the presentation given earlier this evening by Amy, please feel free to contact her. And could we also contact Amy if you'd like to consider to be part of the town and community charter as well. So if you bear those in mind. And I think that's all from me, and I thank you all for attending and wish you a good evening.
Chair, can I just confirm that the committee are happy to note the second request for consideration?
Oh, right. Yeah. Is everybody happy to note the recommendations on that last report? Thank you. Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night, all.
Good night, all.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night.